Welcome back to the Sports Mag Zone. The Lakers have 6 games to get their act together and snatch a play-in spot in the NBA. I didn't say playoffs. But the prospects of LeBron and company lining up in the playoffs looks remote at best. Neither LeBron nor Anthony Davis available on Thursday as the Lakers went down 122-109 to the Jazz. That was the 4th straight loss for the team. There's a distinct sense of drift about the NBA's most glamorous team. Quite predictably, some pundits are laying the blame squarely at the feet of LeBron James. Speaking on a podcast earlier this week, reporter Brian Windhorst said, LeBron's career operates in 4-year increments. He wears his teams out. I call it operational fatigue. It happened the first time in Cleveland. They ran out of draft picks. They had a bunch of guys in their mid-30s, Shaq close to the finish line, and Antoine Jamison. He goes to Miami, 4 years. They ran out of draft picks. In his last game, 3 guys retired after the game. He goes back to Cleveland, 4 years, great run. Then they ran out of draft picks. Here we are in LA, 4th year now, the oldest team we've seen in NBA history, and they ran out of draft picks, plus they're exhausted. So, is there any merit in this 4-year cycle theory concerning LeBron and his teams? For perspective, we turn to our expert analyst, Alister Albert. Oh, Alister bailed on us at the last minute. It seems he had a clashing engagement. But what makes you of this theory?
Well, let me be guided here, George, by O'Rain Buchanan, who is our resident NBA expert in the zone room. And when he proffered this discussion earlier on today, he suggested that at first glance he was a little disturbed by that narrative, as if, they're disrespecting the king.
And then he researched.
And then he researched and realized that, you know what? He could be onto something here. So if Bucky, who is a big LeBron James fan, is sort of sitting back and saying, the history kind of points to that, I don't think I can fight it, because and you just gave the sequence, and from team to team to team.
Yes.
So there is something there.
Sport is such that the reason sport is debated and argued over, which is a different thing, so passionately on so many forums, fora, if you will, Whitaker, is because there are multiple right answers to one issue. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah?
Sometimes, yeah.
In life, we're taught to accept there can only be one right answer. Yeah. Sport is different.
Yeah, not black and white.
No.
There's,
Because what you say is true, and the research bears out the theory, the argument that he wears on teams. But if you look at this Lakers selection, it was not designed to fall apart this way. It was designed with a LeBron who knows his body, knows what he can produce over the course of the season. And given the injury-disrupted season he had before, he spent the offseason fixing himself so he could manage the grind of this season. And his injury record this season hasn't been bad. He's not had the free flow that he's had in previous fit seasons, but given what he had last season and a couple seasons before, he's been good this year. Anthony Davis, Lance. For Anthony Davis to miss as many games this season as he has was not in anybody's plan, any at all. And with Anthony Davis fit, even if the other pieces which haven't worked, if those held their posture and didn't work, we wouldn't be here talking about the Lakers languishing in the 11th in the Western Conference and struggling to make the play-in to get a chance of making the playoffs. And so it hinges on one player now. The wearing after 4 seasons argument would seem to suggest that the things he does always end up in that result. And I'm suggesting to you, forget that. I'm asserting to you that the plan this season was not that. It wasn't in keeping with that narrative. It's just that the vagaries of sport and the way that injury bites players has beaten Anthony Davis in a way that he can't and couldn't help the team. That's why the Lakers are where they are.
In other words, you are suggesting that even though the history with the other franchises that we just mentioned support the view, the LA Lakers illustration is doesn't have the same tone to the others.
Yes.
Because what is happening with them now was completely unforeseen.
That is exactly what I'm saying. And when you look at Cleveland, Lance, look, Cleveland is a lovely place. I think I've been there 3 times. It's a nice place. They've won their championship. But when Kyrie Irving was there, Kyrie Irving was never going to finish his career in Cleveland. It wasn't something that he would even think of, I'm going to finish my career here in Cleveland, Lance. No. You want to go where the bright lights are. You want to go to New York. He's in Brooklyn. He couldn't pick a better place, except if the place is LA. Yeah. So Kyrie Irving was always going to move on. So that kind of LeBron, that kind of LeBron team would have always been struggling to hold on to that part of it, the Kyrie. Yeah. Watch this now. He brings AD to LA. LA is a place that a player can think about a long-term future, can think about retiring here. It's that kind of place. Of course, a basketball career changes and a player's priority changes, and a player loses ability, loses fitness, and his status gets deflated and he has to move somewhere else. But so the kind of team he was building and the young man he chose to join him there was a young man who was looking at the city and looking at the Lakers as a longer term project. And with his quality, you said, well, if AD stays here for 5-7 seasons, we're going to be contenders in the West for 5-7 seasons and maybe be contenders in the league 5-7 seasons and beyond. I think we have Alister with us now, the resident expert. Alister, are you there?
I am. Sorry. I'm not sure what happened earlier on, but yeah.
That's fine, man. Better late than never. So we're looking at the theory that LeBron weighs on teams in 4th seasons. And there are numbers to back that up. But I was saying to Lance that in sport, the beauty about sport is that there are more than one right answer to issues and more than one sensible explanations. And while the numbers may bear that out, it's a bit more nuanced than that. And I'm striking up for LeBron here. What say you?
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors that you have to kind of take into account. You talk about health. You talk about some teams maybe just having a level of luck in terms of the playoffs, the matchups that they get, the health of the other teams, etc. In terms of LeBron weighing on the teams, I think that is correct. When he comes into these teams, he demands a level of competitive fervor in terms of how they play. Although it doesn't kind of show out this year with the Lakers. But, in terms of the team makeup, he wants guys who he thinks are ready to go now. He doesn't want rookies. We saw that with that happening in Cleveland when Cleveland had the #1 pick and they drafted Andrew Wiggins and they traded him to Minnesota to get Kevin Love. He wanted ready-made players, experienced players to kind of play alongside him. Some people will say friends, etc. And when he comes in, he comes in with those expectations of championship or bust, basically. He ran into the finals up 8 years straight and everything. He shows that these guys are ready to get into the championship round. And when you see they don't do it, they expended so much amount of energy trying to draft players, not drafts, but trade for players who are experienced and have loads of tenure in the league. They give up all the draft picks and everything that they have. Brian Windhorst, who had that article about, LeBron James exhausting franchises, it shows that, they give up a whole bunch of draft picks to get guys who can play now. And, then there's nothing for them to transition to in the future. And, that holds true. It happened in Miami, it happened in Cleveland, and it's probably happening right here with the Lakers right now. So, yeah, I do believe, he's kind of weighing on the teams, but that's with the expectations of winning. They won in 2020. Is that a good trade-off? In 4 years, they won a championship. Hey, that's really good. But what happens moving forward? And because, they deplete the team so much, there's nothing much that they could do moving forward.
Yeah. From where you sit and given the Lakers run in, do they get into this plane or they have to write off this season from now?
Man, I think it looks like they had to write it off because I'm looking at, the games left to play. The Spurs seem to have the slightly easier schedule. The Lakers have the hardest one. Pelicans, they're playing the Pelicans tonight. Nuggets, Suns, Warriors, the Thunder. Maybe they might win against the Thunder, but the Thunder, I think, have beat them already two times this season, which is, again, part of the embarrassment of the season. And then Denver for the last game at the end of the season. So it looks like, they're going to have a hard slog. Would they even play the AD and LeBron tonight? I think they're both up as questionable for tonight. If they can't win a game against the Pelicans tonight, you know, and the rest of these teams, they're not going to make it. So it's a matter of, I think, from tonight, let's see what happens tonight. If LeBron and AD don't play, I think that's the Lakers conceding. This is it. But, you know, let's see what happens.
Question for you, though. How many of those games are road games?
That's a good question. I think it's about 2 or 3 of them. I'm not too sure at the moment.
And inevitably, you know how TV works, Alister. You know quite well that if and when the Lakers confirm that they aren't going to be a part of the postseason, the obvious discussion will emerge. What does this do for his legacy? Yeah, this never happened to MJ in a steady relationship with the NBA. The man retired twice and came back, so you can't hold him missing the playoffs when he came back old and slow against him. You say that you are the best player in the league. At the start of the season, people were saying you were the best player in the league. And during the course of the season, at points, you played like you were the best player in the league. And yet you lead a team that doesn't even make the playoffs. What does this do for LBJ's legacy?
Man, and Michael Jordan never got swept in the finals
never,
as well.
Never.
You know, the thing about this is for LeBron, I'm even going to take it a step further. If LeBron doesn't outright make the playoffs this year, I don't even look at him as the second best ever in these rankings. You know, I peg him down maybe 3 or 4 because, you know, that's embarrassing. The league has now instituted a play-in tournament. This is another step for you to get into the playoffs. And you, as one of the best players of all time, you're still playing at a really high level, averaging 30.1 points a game, ready to get the scoring championship, a team that you thought was ready to contend, and you can't make the playoffs. Russell Westbrook has played, you know, as many games as he has. He's a former MVP. Yes, Anthony Davis hasn't you know, played very much because of health. But, you know, you are still the man. You played, you know, quite a lot of those games. You need to be able to carry a team with those broad shoulders of yours. And if you can't do that and outright miss the playoffs, that's utterly embarrassing, not just for the Lakers, but for his legacy. And I will actually peg him a step down in the all-time rankings because of that.
Has he had help from the bench? And I'm looking at Frankie V. So in other words, Alister, are all those things the Frankie V haters said about Frankie V now proven true about Frankie V?
I think, let me tell you something. Frank Vogel is a good coach. I think, you know, he's gotten a little bit of a bad rap because of what has happened, because team construction, he didn't really want this team that he has right now. But you have the hand that was dealt to you. You have to make something out of it. And I don't think he's used his rotations properly this year. You know, he hasn't been able to use effectively the size advantages that he has on this team. A lot of these teams, when you look at, you know, the reason why they're as good as they are, they follow through with, you know, the advantages that their team has. The Lakers had depth and size. They didn't use that as much. They tried to go small too often, and, you know, it just kind of messed with them. So, yeah, I don't think it looks good for him right now. Defensively, you know, he's known for his defense, and the team is like one of the worst in the league. So I don't think it bodes well for him, and I think, you know, he should have been fired even before the trade deadline this year, because, you know, the writing was on the wall with some of the rotations and the way that he played. But ultimately, you know, LeBron was helped construct this team. And like I said, you know, a lot of the accountability needs to go to him and Rob Pelinka for acquiescing to some of the trade demands that, you know, they did.
Hear you on that, my friend. Have a good weekend. All the best. We'll talk again.
Same to you guys. See you next week.
Before we end this segment, these are the scores of the games played on Thursday night. Pistons winning, Bucks winning, beating the Nets in an absolute cracker. Went to overtime. Giannis was monstrous in that game. Hawks beating the Cavaliers, Bulls beating the Clippers, and the Jazz taking down the Lakers.